This was an election that no one wanted.
This was a profoundly disappointing election from our lens, and I think all three parties should be worried about how angry the seniors are rapidly becoming.
And they seem to step on a few landmines. The vaccination one is a big landmine.
From the Zoomerplex in historic Liberty Village, the Zoomer with Libby Znaimer.
Welcome to the Zoomer. I'm Libby Znaimer. It was the shortest campaign allowed by law, but also the most expensive ever. After 36 days and $610 million, we have a parliament almost identical to the one the Governor General dissolved on August 15th. It was a pandemic election most Canadians did not want, and the governing Liberals never came up with a satisfactory explanation for calling it. Accordingly, Justin Trudeau becomes the Prime Minister with the slimmest share of overall electoral support in Canadian history. We'll take an in-depth look at where that leaves the country. I'd like to thank our virtual audience, our virtual panelists, and we even have two panelists in-house here. First, let's tee up the topic.
Canadians have re-elected a Liberal minority government, falling short of the 170 seats needed for a majority. This is the sixth minority government of the last 8 elections since 2000. This is also the 5th election in the last 6 that the Liberals have finished behind the Conservatives in the popular vote. Since 2006, they've averaged 30% of the vote, to the Conservatives 36%. Election 44 has the Tories at 34% of the popular vote, compared to 32% for the Liberals. At $610 million, this election was the most expensive ever, a full $100 million more than the vote the Liberal leader called just 2 years ago. And for what? It would seem more of the same.
Will the opposition parties be able to exact a higher price for propping up the Liberals? And will Justin Trudeau be called to account for another minority? Can Conservative leader Erin O'Toole keep the job after losing? It took less than 48 hours after the election for the knives to come out, with a member of the Conservative Party's National Council calling for an early leadership review. So, will this make this easier for the Liberals to do as they see fit? Let's begin with Bob.
Nice to be here, Libby. Yeah, I think the Liberals are in relatively good shape for one real reason. Nobody wants to go back to the polls for a while. Canadians do not want to see politicians at the door for a while, particularly federal ones, and I don't think the parties want to go back to an election. And also the government has, despite some of the things that you said, which are accurate, earned the right to form a government. They have between 150 and 160 seats. They're going to have to work with the opposition parties, and I think they're going to have to do a better job working with the opposition parties. There's work to do, and everyone's going to have to put a little water in their wine.
Jason Lietaer, you're a Conservative strategist. Where does all this leave the Conservatives?
Well, I mean, a little disappointed, Libby. I'm not going to pretend that we didn't hope to win this one. And so, you know, I think we went into it hoping that we would win, but not too optimistic we would. We were down 15 points about 6 weeks ago. I thought O'Toole ran a very good campaign. Obviously, I've got some quibbles with some things, and there's some members of our party who have some quibbles with some things, but I thought the headwinds were pretty difficult. Number one, he was completely unknown going into this campaign. Number two, as I said, he was well behind. Number three, the issue set really worked out for the Prime Minister. So, you know, he was able to wedge our party on just the pandemic generally. The rise of the PPC cost us a couple of points in some key areas. Our party has high standards. We expect to win. We expect to be competitive, especially when we win the popular vote. So we've got some work to do to tidy up some of that stuff. And my own view is Mr. O'Toole should have another crack at this, because I thought he made significant steps in this campaign.
What about Jagmeet Singh, Sara Singh? You know, he seemed to be doing so well, so popular, social media, huge star, but he didn't really make any gains.
Well, actually, Libby, Jagmeet and the campaign that we ran was a really positive and hopeful one. And I think it did resonate with Canadians. I mean, I think he is facing some challenges as a still relatively new leader, but we did make gains in this election. Actually, the only leader to do so. We did pick up some seats in Edmonton, for example. But it was a tough fight. And I think overall, Jagmeet has done a fantastic job. And I know in NDP circles, we're all really proud of his performance in this last election.
Kim Wright, do you agree with that?
Yeah, what is interesting about the way the campaign has unfolded for the New Democrats is actually went after candidates that were not your usual typical subjects. What we think of Parliament is, a little more affluent, a little bit more bland, if you will. But, look, we went after a lot of Indigenous leaders, community activists, women, LGBTQ community, making sure that you had a candidate base that was reflective of Parliament. That takes a lot of work. That takes a lot of, digging through and making sure you've got candidates that see themselves reflected in Parliament and are being supported in that way. What we saw in Jagmeet's election results, yes, seat counts were very disappointing, no question. However, where we saw a rise in the New Democrat vote in places that aren't exactly bastions of NDP support. But I can tell you, New Democrats are going to be there to make sure that the priorities of Canadians are front and center, putting egos aside.
David, in all the groups listed as the groups that people were trying to include, I didn't hear anything about older Canadians. I thought they were kind of forgotten in this campaign.
Well, I think that, and I'm obviously speaking from the perspective of CARP, I'm not a professional politician. I do have a couple of observations to make about what I've just heard. But to your question, the parties have figured out how to ignore seniors and yet hold serve. And it's very serious, because when I say this, I don't mean they're insincere. But let's face it, seniors are the easiest issue to talk about and one of the hardest to do anything about. So the Liberals resuscitate an old promise of $500 and sprinkle some dollars. The Conservatives talk about pension protection. The NDP talk about getting rid of private ownership in nursing homes, which is not going to happen in the real world. Everybody knows how to say the right things, express the right concerns, but none of them really address the substance of how deeply the structural problems. Our healthcare polled as the #1 issue. It was kissed off in the most shallow, vague, here's a bit more money. So all of the parties got away with this. And since we have representatives of the parties here, and there's a whole raft of provincial elections coming up, I can tell you that CARP will be armed and dangerous during these campaigns. We want to see specifics, we want honesty, and we are going to make people pay at the polls if they don't deliver. This was a profoundly disappointing election from our lens, and I think all three parties should be worried about how angry the seniors are rapidly becoming.
Okay, well, there's a lot to dig into there, but right now we need to take a break, and we'll be right back with more.
Shortly after the election, the knives certainly came out with respect to his performance, some calling it lackluster.
Thank you all. You are sending us back to work with a clear mandate to get Canada through this pandemic and to the brighter days ahead. And my friends, that's exactly what we are ready to do. There are still votes to be counted, but what we've seen tonight is that millions of Canadians have chosen a progressive plan. Some have talked about division, but that's not what I see. That's not what I've seen these past weeks across the country. I see Canadians standing together in your determination to end this pandemic, together for real climate action, for $10 a day childcare, for homes that are in reach for middle-class families,
The Prime Minister spoke to unity, but the election highlighted the divisions among us. Quebec versus the rest of Canada, East versus West, vaccinated against unvaccinated, and yes, even young against old, not to mention a growing fringe of angry, disaffected people. So what part of this is most urgent? And Jason, you were talking about the popular support for the Conservatives, but it's mostly in the West versus the Central Canada and the East, which are more to the left. So what about all these rifts?
Yeah, it's difficult. So one thing I mean, we lost Ontario by 3 or 4 points. It was very close. We lost the 905 by more than a handful, a lot closer than last time. So that's a step forward. But I generally agree with your contention, which is, Eastern Canada is the place that the Conservatives need to grow. But just on the point that you're trying to make, which is, I thought the Prime Minister, it's a bit disingenuous. Now, I realize I'm a political opponent of the Prime Minister, and I congratulate him on his win. They won this election campaign. This was not the Sunny Ways Justin Trudeau of 2015. This was a different Justin Trudeau who won this campaign. He spent the last 2 or 3 weeks of this campaign essentially calling people names. And I thought, as frustrated as we all are with those who are unvaccinated, Mr. Trudeau, really used that to his advantage, and it might have won them this election. But I do think there's long-term consequences to that. There's going to be anger long-term, and I thought the Prime Minister, I might have my quibbles with him, but up until this election campaign, I wouldn't have accused him of that. I thought he did a lot to stoke division in this campaign, and he's going to have to do a lot to bring everyone together at the end of it.
Bob?
Yeah, I think that's nonsense, and I don't agree with it. I think if we just take a look at our vaccination levels across the country, they've been pretty good across the board. I think he worked his tail off in the last 18 months with the provinces. He had over 36 different meetings with premiers. I think they did a good job getting PPE out to people. So I think that there was a good job done on this file, and I think Canadians recognize that. Is it perfect? No. They did try to get as many people vaccinated as possible, but there is a hardcore, a wacko element, I'll be honest, out there who are not prepared to play ball. And I'm sorry, they don't get to dictate to the 90% of us what happens in this country. We need to move forward. We need to get the economy going again. We need to get lives back. We need to have a situation where people can visit their parents again in homes and other things like that. And we can't let this hostage taking continue. So I agree with the Prime Minister on this, and I completely disagree with Jason.
Yeah, but the question is, did the Prime Minister stoke divisions?
Brilliantly. I mean, we're not talking about the underlying morality of it, as do you agree with him or not. He was brilliant at stoking the divisions. And by the way, the tiny vocal minority did get to dictate a lot more than I've seen in the media, with all due respect to my friend from the Conservatives who said in the first round that People's Party cost them a few votes here and there. They cost them 23 seats. There are 23 seats that if you added the People's Party vote to the Conservative vote, the Conservatives would have won those seats. So Maxime Bernier, without winning a seat, could have cost O'Toole the elect, came darn close to costing O'Toole. And until they face this, they're going to be just going around in circles. I'm sorry.
Let me just interject. So the question is, are all those disaffected people Conservative voters? I mean, I've seen a thing that the typical anti-vaxxer is a 42-year-old woman who votes Liberal.
Okay, but that's not the only people who voted for the People's Party. The point is that the Conservatives would have loved to have those votes in those close ridings. And the real division is deeper than what Trudeau did during an election campaign. And I'm not necessarily naive about what he did. He played the cards brilliantly, me as just an ordinary voter. But there are very deep divisions, and there are deep divisions we know within the Conservatives between the real conservative, the conservative Conservatives and the red Tories. That is going to hang like a weight around their neck. On the Liberal side, he can't win a majority because he can't hold the bloc to under 30 seats.
To our NDP women, the NDP definitely going to be holding the balance of power. They're the most natural coalition partners. But as observers, do you think that Justin Trudeau will pay a price, or Erin O'Toole, Sara Singh?
I think it's not for me to say whether, they maybe need to look at a leadership review for Aaron O'Toole. I know that just shortly after the election, the knives certainly came out with respect to his performance, some calling it lackluster. And I think for us, as New Democrats, we're proud of the work that Jagmeet has done. And I think he's going to hold a similar position as he did before in terms of really pushing progressive ideas forward, holding Justin Trudeau to account. I think he did that brilliantly in the last parliament, and I'm hoping to see more of that. But I think in terms of this election, this was an election that no one wanted. Justin Trudeau told voters he would not be calling an election before it should be happening, and he did the opposite. And I think he has still a long way to go in order to gain the trust of Canadians. I also think it's important to note that, while I was out door knocking, what I was hearing from many, that their vote for the Liberal Party wasn't in support of the Liberal Party, it was to keep Conservatives out. And so I think while folks are celebrating this as a win, I think we need to look a little deeper in terms of what the results really tell Canadians and the perspectives that they currently hold with this government.
Kim, that is one of the fearful things that Justin Trudeau, again, probably did brilliantly, and it probably cost your party, saying a vote for the NDP is a vote for the Conservatives.
Yeah, the strategic voting message, unfortunately, continues to work. You put up these straw man, boogeyman type of arguments of if you vote, you waste your vote with another party, so to speak, it will cause Sodom and Gomorrah. The reality is that no one is entitled to your vote. They have to earn that vote. As to, and this is the most disheartening component of this election campaign, has been what has happened with former MP Raj Saini and sexual misconduct allegations that included a staff person trying to commit suicide in his office, the Spadina Fort York Liberal elected MP Kevin Vuong, who has also had charges of sexual misconduct. None of these were allegedly vetted by the Prime Minister's office or the Liberal Party. It does show that continued toxicity that has plagued Parliament Hill, that frightens me as a woman in politics, looking out for others in politics. That needs to get cleaned up.
Yeah, and the NDP had candidates that they didn't properly vet either. But right now, stay with us. We'll be back after the break.
They seem to step on a few landmines. The vaccination one is a big landmine, and it really did raise, I think, questions with Canadians.
Five weeks ago, Mr. Trudeau asked for a majority. He said the minority parliament was, quote, unworkable. But tonight, Canadians did not give Mr. Trudeau the majority mandate he wanted. In fact, Canadians sent him back with another minority at the cost of $600 million and deeper divisions in our great country. Just days ago, he said he would hold yet another election within 18 months if he didn't get his way.
Well, Aaron O'Toole is hoping he will still be around to lead the Conservatives through the next election, whenever it's called. But is the reason he's not our new Prime Minister because he rejected vaccine mandates and refused to criticize Jason Kenney's handling of the pandemic in Alberta. The Liberals failed to make the pandemic an issue at the outset, but did it help them in the end? And given that O'Toole went to the centre on everything else, why not this? Jason, I have to say that's something that doesn't make sense to me.
There were two reasons. There are two things that I think Mr. O'Toole, if he had to go back, he would probably change. The first would have been he probably would have dealt with the vaccine mandate question in a different way. I don't want to pretend, though, that this is an easy question for him. I mean, and we can all sort of, call each other names about, there are unvaccinated Canadians in Canada, and it's difficult. I think you do have to show leadership on this. I think he was in a very difficult position. I think he probably should have chosen the other alternative, or his team should have chosen the other alternative to water under the bridge. It didn't hurt him for a couple of weeks. It really hurt him in the last couple of weeks of the campaign, and I think that's something that he would want to have back. The other thing is, I think they probably would have wanted to leave out any references to assault rifles in their election platform. I thought that was something that came back to bite them in a very easy way to predict. And I think they just had no defense for it. I think they had a ton of momentum the first 2-3 weeks of the campaign. I think they lost that momentum based on those couple of issues in the last part of the campaign. That said, on balance, as I've said it a couple of times, I think O'Toole performed very, very, very well. I think on those couple of issues, team probably let him down. And I think he's got a real shot to be prime minister someday if the party sticks with him.
Bob, again, you know, the conventional wisdom at the beginning was that Team Trudeau tried to turn the pandemic into a wedge issue, but failed. But at the end, certainly when we saw what was going on in Alberta, do you think that's what turned it to them? What's your view of the role of the pandemic in this victory?
Well, I think number one, Team Trudeau was rusty off the top. I think they were suffering from governmentitis. I don't think they were as well prepared for the campaign as the Conservatives were. And I thought the Conservatives ran a good campaign. I agree with Jason. I thought O'Toole did quite a good job as the Conservative leader. I thought their platform rollout was good. I thought they had a very solid 10 days. They seemed to run out of gas after that, and then they seemed to step on a few landmines. The vaccination one is a big landmine, and it really did raise, I think, questions with Canadians. Assault rifles, for the life of me, why they continue to put that in their platform. It's like handing us a baseball bat in every election. So that just doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't think Premier Kenney helped them at all. But overall, I think the least of their problems is Mr. O'Toole. I think they've got some policy issues and some organizational issues that they've got to conquer.
Mm-hmm. Well, depending on whether the party members agree that his leadership should be reviewed. But back to the role of the pandemic, I know that on my radio show, I had calls from people saying, I am a Conservative voter, but I'm voting Liberal because of the stand on mandatory vaccination. David, certainly for an older demographic, do you think that played a role?
Whether it deserves to play a role or not, whether it's an important point or not is one thing. I don't think it played any role. And the reason, I have a very different reason and I'm not the pro, you guys are the pros. But if I look at the arc of the campaign, the Liberals never increased their vote from the beginning to the end. They only retreated. Modestly, but they retreated. The Conservatives kind of bounced between 32 and 34. The Liberals didn't grow. Trudeau didn't start out here and end up here. He started out here and ended up down. And it's the internal math of where the ridings are and where those seats are. O'Toole said, and I think he was right on election night, that they lost 30 seats by less than, I think it was, Jason would know, 2,000 or 3,000 votes.
2,000 votes.
Some of those
so, yeah.
Liberal gains, or some of those Liberal holds, I mean, the Liberals held Davenport by 100 votes, admittedly NDP, not Conservative. So I don't see Trudeau having done anything with the wedge issues, with not the wedge issues, with all the stuff he didn't increase their votes at all.
Sara Singh, what role do you think COVID played for the NDP's election?
You know, I think for a lot of people, issues of affordability, the handling of the pandemic have been top of mind. I know here in Ontario, obviously there's a focus on the Liberal federal government's handling of the pandemic, but a lot of concerns about the Ford administration and their handling of the pandemic. So I think we were hearing a lot of that at the doors, and folks were very worried that if they elected a Conservative government, they would see a repeat of Doug Ford's chaotic and disastrous handling of COVID-19 in our province. And they didn't want to see that repeated. And I think it was top of mind for them, but I think all the other issues as well. So I think COVID played an important part in just helping people situate what responses they wanted to the pandemic. But I think all of the other pocketbook issues and concerns that people have are still top of mind for them when they were making their decision.
And Kim, you know, one thing that I found interesting about the whole COVID issue, I mean, speaking personally, I'm still annoyed at how late we were at getting the vaccines, and I didn't hear a whisper about that anywhere.
Absolutely. And that was a challenge and continue to be a challenge. Frankly, I would have liked to see the resources we put into running election campaigns to going neighborhood by neighborhood, community by community, and getting people vaccinated. It's really difficult for people to get out, and maybe there's a bit of fear of going into some of the community centers to get their shots. Certainly there were fears of going into community centers to cast a ballot. So how those things unfolded were really quite a challenge throughout the course of the campaign.
We'll be right back with more of the Zoomer after the break.
Will one of the party leaders finally come out and say, our healthcare system, the Canada Health Act, is not working?
I want to congratulate the Prime Minister on his re-election as Prime Minister of Canada. And I want to thank Canadians for voting. And I want to let Canadians know that you can count on New Democrats to continue fighting for you. As we've fought for you in the pandemic, when times were difficult, when people were struggling, when people were worried about their future, we were there for you. We fought to make sure people got more help. We fought to increase the CERB, we fought to increase the wage subsidy, we saved millions of jobs, and we helped millions of Canadians stay at home. We are going to continue fighting for you. Just the same way we fought for you in the pandemic, you can count on us to continue those fights.
Will seniors have to rely on the opposition to press for their interests? One of the 3 defeated ministers, all of them women, by the way, was Deb Schulte, Minister for Seniors, only the second one ever appointed by the Liberals. Will there be another? Will it have any clout? And what about the push for national standards for long-term care when Quebec and other provinces reject the prospect of direction from Ottawa? And of course, there's the woman problem in politics. Let's begin with David. What happens now on this file?
Well, as I said at the outset, I think all 3 parties have shown that they can say the right things and offer very little of substance. They've checked the boxes. It's easy to do. Oh, there's an election. Seniors. What about this? It's not difficult, but nobody ever dealt with substance. And the best example was the attempt to demonize O'Toole, probably successfully, for being pro-private health care. He's against health care. We've heard about our wonderful health care system. Canada spends, as you know, you and I have talked about it, second from the top of OECD countries on health care, of parallel countries with single-payer systems. We are at the top in spending. We are at the bottom in deliverables.
Better than the United States.
That's been the strategy all along. Oh, look at the big bad United States. Our leaders, all 3 parties, they don't want us looking at Australia, Germany, France, England. Nobody wants to come out and say, and I'll just throw that out there, 30% of Canada's healthcare system today is private.
Yeah.
You need a physiotherapist, you need a dentist, you need eyeglasses, you need all kinds of cares that is delisted by their... We're pretending. We're in a make-believe world where we have this wonderful, pristine, wonderful system underperforming the rest of the world. Eventually, that volcano will blow. CARP is going to do our modest effort to make it front and center in every provincial election. Ontario, we see you in June.
Kim Wright and Sara Singh, I want to turn to the woman problem. So for the Liberals, the 3 defeated, currently serving ministers are women. Catherine McKenna did not run. Women in politics in general are treated in a way that is appalling. Whatever you think of the Green Party, to see the way that Annamie Paul was treated, I have no words, really. It was just appalling. And we had those 2 cases of Liberals belatedly dropping candidates who had bad history with allegations of sexual impropriety or assault. So what is the election has it highlighted that? Has it made it worse? What's your view, Sara?
I think, Libby, as you touched on, I think for women who are engaging in the political arena, it can be a very toxic and difficult environment to work in. And I think when we look at leaders like Anna May Paul, the first racialized woman to be a leader of a party, it is heartbreaking to see what she was put through and how people treated her throughout this election. And I think for women, it's an ongoing challenge for us. We saw what Catherine McKenna had to deal with. This is ongoing. And I think that, unfortunately, they weren't able to, regain their seats. But I think we need to acknowledge these problems, and we need to have frank conversations and create space and support women who are running, because we do face greater challenges. But I think we need to create the structures to address the patriarchy that exists and ensure that women feel empowered to run and are supported when they do it.
Bob, Trudeau, he came out, he wants a gender parity cabinet. He's now down 4 female ministers. Clearly that might need a cabinet shuffle, but what's he going to do about that?
Well, first of all, he's got a number of terrific women in that caucus, and he elected a number of good women. There's several right across the country who were elected. So I think there is a good pool of candidates there for parliamentary secretaries and cabinet positions. So from that perspective, I think it's less of a problem for him than many people might think. But I agree with Sara. There's a lot of tough issues still for women in politics. Many years ago, I was the chief of staff to the first woman political leader in Ontario, and her name was Lynn MacLeod. She was the leader of the Liberal Party. I remember back then she was expected to perform and to a level that was not expected from her opponent. So I have seen firsthand what went on, and there was an entire generation of women right across the country who didn't get elected. It wasn't another decade until women started getting elected as premier. So there is no question that there are 2 standards there, and there to this day exists a bit of 2 standards. And the Anna May Paul situation is just off the charts. And I don't know how the Green Party will be able to live with themselves after that one.
It hits conservative women as well. Conservative women politicians. If there's anything that crosses party lines, it's that. Jason?
This is an incredible problem. So first of all, to those in politics like Sara, actually with their names on the ballots, I don't understand why you do it. First of all, man or women, it's crazy. The stuff that you're going into. I've been involved in politics since the days of Mike Harris, and let me. Mike Harris had some pretty tough days as well, but nothing compared to the kinds of things that people are dealing with now in terms of online, especially women. So this is something we've got to deal with. And the truth is, I worry generally about politics because the engagement is going down. People are less interested. We're so angry at each other. And I think we've all got to check our tone a little bit. One of the things that I think is important is to not question, where possible, the motives of your opponent. It's one thing to question the policies, the decisions, the judgment, all of those things. But too often we're challenging the motives of our opponents, and I think that's the one thing that we've really got to watch, because that's what leads to the toxicity in politics.
There's more after the break. Don't go away.
How much it breaks my senior heart to walk in and out of retail operations and see how many seniors are now fulfilling the roles of cashiers and stock clerks.
Welcome back. Now it's time for questions from the audience, starting with Carolyn. Hello, Carolyn.
So I just moved from Ontario to New Brunswick. Unlike Ontario, they don't have health or prescription coverage for seniors. And my question to the politicians is, should people choose between paying for a place to live or insulin?
The short answer is absolutely not. And this is why that my entire political life and, as long as New Democrats have been around, they have been pushing to make sure that pharmacare is a leading part of this, so you don't have to make those choices. In fact, Tommy Douglas used to say that the thing he regretted was not doing pharmacare at the same time as healthcare, because they are so important. It's great to go to a doctor and get a prescription, but if you can't afford to fill it, then you're taking lives in hands here. And so we do need to actually get on with this. And I know it gets promised, although it didn't seem to make it into the Liberal platform this time or in their costing. But it is something that is always at the top of my list, at the New Democrats list, and I know of Jagmeet Singh's list.
Bob, why was it abandoned?
I don't think it is abandoned. In fact, I think they've worked out an agreement with the smallest province to begin with. I think they're continuing to work on it. It's not as simple as pointed out by our friends in the NDP. And I will say the top of their list is pretty crowded because it has about 71 different items that are all their top priorities there, which would be about $285 billion more spending a year if we did everything that Kim and Sara wanted us to do. And I think the government has been dealing with the primary health issue right now, which has been vaccinations, which has been PPE, which has been making sure that people are safe in their homes, and at the same time safe economically through CERB, CEBA, and other things too as well. That has been the major priority. I think they've been doing a pretty good job of it.
Okay, next question from Douglas.
I just had a question about the Canada Pension Plan and OAS. There was a recent clawback to a lot of the seniors, and I'm wondering if the new platform plan, because I never really got to look at it, has anything in the way of possibly rescinding that, or if there will be any changes to the CPP and OAS for seniors.
I can tell you what our position was that there was a number of problems in the we have to distinguish OAS and Guaranteed Income Supplement from CPP, which CPP is based on your contributions and it's taxable income and everybody gets it. But the OAS and Guaranteed Income Supplement do get clawed back. But the real problem is that they haven't touched the poverty threshold in, I don't know if it's 20 years, they've left it alone at $18,900 for a single, you make 20 grand, you're not eligible suddenly at all. So they've got to address this in more than a piecemeal way of saying, we'll add a little bit here, but we're going to claw it back there. But the whole premise of it is founded on a ridiculously low poverty level that they haven't touched forever.
Linda, you're next.
My very first question had to do with what was wrong with the turnout vis-a-vis the mail-in ballots. And now that we've seen the full election, what the heck was wrong with the full voter turnout? But just to build on Douglas's question, all I want to say is how much it breaks my senior heart to walk in and out of retail operations and see how many seniors are now fulfilling the roles of cashiers and stock clerks and whatever other backbreaking work there is to do. It breaks my heart to see my cohorts having to do that just to be able to afford their apartments and their ways of life.
Jason, do you have a comment on the low turnout?
Yeah, a couple things. And the last point that you made too, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name, but it is heartbreaking to see some of that. And I think we're seeing a shortage of labor across the country. And it is, I think there's both a sense of duty for our seniors, which is quite unbelievable. You're seeing that volunteering and doing some of these jobs, and then a need that you're talking about. It is heartbreaking. I agree with that. Just in terms of your question on turnout, back in June, Elections Canada asked the Prime Minister, they said to him, if you're going to run an election campaign, can you have it be longer than the minimum? So the minimum is about 36 days. They said, we're going to need more time to set up more polling stations, find volunteers, find staff members, all of that kind of stuff. The PM, and I'm trying not to make this as partisan as I can, but the PM disregarded that advice. He didn't do it. Nobody was too excited about this campaign. And that's one of the things that really brings people out is if you're excited about one of the options in front of you. And the truth is, we didn't see that kind of enthusiasm in this campaign.
Hope that answers your questions. When we come back, final thoughts from our panelists. That's next. Welcome back to the Zoomer. It's now time for final thoughts from our panelists, starting with Jason Lietaer.
Thanks, Libby. I think what we need coming out of this election is somebody to bring us together. I think that's the PM's job. He's going to have to work really hard for that. I actually think this minority parliament is going to last a little bit longer than people would think. I think, we could go 2, 3, 4 years. In 2008, Mr. Harper lasted till 2011. I wouldn't be surprised to see that kind of thing go ahead. And I think there was a lot of questions tonight on seniors policy. And I do agree that was mostly forgotten in this election campaign. There was a lot of other issues discussed that was mostly forgotten. And I think people are going to have to hold both the Prime Minister and the opposition parties to account to make sure that that gets the kind of focus it deserves.
Bob.
I'm going to basically agree with Jason on this. I think one of the number one things that has to do is the parties in Ottawa need to work better together if this parliament is going to have a chance to work. I think there's no reason why this parliament shouldn't last 3 or 4 years. And I think it's the government's responsibility, but it's also the opposition's responsibility to make that happen. And the government's also got to work hard with the provinces to make sure that things are well delivered, particularly as it relates to the pandemic, and that services are getting out to people that need them.
David.
59% turnout, 58% turnout, the lowest ever by 1/10 of a point. Seniors can make a difference between victory and defeat. CARP would like the parties to be more honest and real and less platitude-y and cliche-ish, and we stand ready to work with all of you to explain some of these facts of life that don't seem to be getting through. But we are on the march, and we are going to hold people accountable for results. Ontario in June, and we're going to be loud and nasty.
Sara Singh.
I think the election was unfortunately cost Canadians quite a lot of time and money. But I think to everyone else's point, I'm hoping that we see some cooperation in Ottawa and that we get some good things done for Canadians.
Kim Wright.
I will always say after every election, voters are never wrong. I may not always like how they vote, but voters are never wrong. And what they did once again is send parliamentarians back to Ottawa in a minority situation where they have to stop throwing the sand at each other and actually get along in the sandbox.
Well, there's little question that this whole exercise was a power grab gone south. But as Liberals point out, a win is a win. So let's hope for the best. Thank you to our virtual audience and to our panelists for participating. We'll see you soon. It's time to zoom out.